The Derwent Superpoint Mini Manual Helical Desktop Sharpener with a desk clamp.
That's a mouthful.
Hello and welcome to Stationery Test Drive, where every week we look at tools and implements and materials that can make for interesting stationery adventures.
In today's episode, we're reviewing the Derwent Superpoint Mini Manual Helical Desktop Sharpener with a desk clamp.
That's a mouthful. I'm Samir.
I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
And we are artists and calligraphers and designers, and as they say, you are only as sharp as you keep your tools. And one of the tools you should get is a sharpener. Now, most of us have the pocket sharpener variety, or the types that just we've had in our little geometry boxes and compass boxes forever. This one's quite different. This one has, as Minjal said, a helical or something or the other, and a crank and a desk mount, and and I guess this isn't really a review show, but clearly we will talk about the kind of things you can do with these. But I think Samir has fished out a sharpener that you guys might be more used to seeing. So why don't you show us what you can get in terms of...
So this is an extremely inexpensive sharpener that I found in my box of pencils. This is what we all know of as a sharpener, and it's essentially just a hole for the pencil and a single blade which is at an angle to the pencil, and you rotate the pencil and it gets sharpened. That's your regular pocket sharpener. Now, the Derwent is a very different kind of sharpener. We will go into more of the details later, but it uses a very different kind of blade and mechanism, and it of course has a crank to do the sharpening with.
So this is very much, let's say, the Rolls Royce of sharpeners. Maybe not in terms of price. I'm sure there are more expensive ones, but clearly in terms of technology and elaborateness and certainly size. It is the Rolls-Royce Phantom to a regular sharpener's Mini Cooper. Now, what we do on this show is test drives, and I know the car metaphor has already been stretched too much on this. So, but what we do as artists, as designers, is we come up with our own way of using these that suits our artistic sensibilities. And this week, in a very unusual change of pace, I, who am mostly an illustrator, went for something letter-based. This is a famous quote. It's attributed to many people throughout time and space, and it's a short quote, and it's often misattributed, and I don't think it's deployed as often as it should be in life. But yeah, that's my test drive, and I know it seems like a strange test drive for a sharpener, but it was made with these two pencils, which we have covered on this show before, but in a transformed, joined form. This is the Natraj red and blue checking pencil, which is made for auditors and teachers and things like that. But we found, if you will watch that episode, you'll find out more, but we found that it's really good for artistic purposes as well, and who knew that it works okay in a Derwent sharpener, because I'd never used one in something this elaborate before. I usually just have a pocket sharpener that maybe we'll cover in future. It's the Toyota Camry of sharpeners, since we're doing this metaphor. It's a Staedtler that I can take along with me, and it produces a very small, short, but very sharp point. But the Derwent is different. It produces a long point, which for this use turned out pretty good, because I was able to put down the lines for the structure of it. But also I was able to put down these sort of, using the face of the pencil, these undertones of blue and red. And there's a bit of green in here as well, because there is a green pencil that I don't have on me at hand right now. So I could lay down an undertone with the flat of the pencil, and there was still a point enough left for me to go in and do textural line work almost to enhance the shading, to give it a bit more grit than just a very smooth sort of thing. What was your experience?
I was actually going to ask you about the sideways application. Is that what you have done in areas like this?
Yeah, so these areas, first I went in, and unfortunately you can't really see them because I've gone over them then with the point. But
which is fine. It acts like an underpainting.
It acts like an underpainting. It gives you that, especially on a paper like this, which is a bit of a tooth to it. It gives it a nice base to build on. I do like this sharpener. I have one of these myself, so I think that's there's really not much to say beyond really the quirks of it. It produces a very specific type of point, which is a sort of long, almost curved taper to it, not like a straight triangular conical thing. Minjal has a couple of here, since we've all used this. And you can kind of see it on these, some on more pencils, on some pencils than others. And I think it's a good thing to have. Now, Minjal, I know you've done research into people who say that you should never use one of these, and that using one of these makes you a bad person. Can you tell us about those?
So, I actually came across this book by cartoonist David Rees. The book is actually called How to Sharpen Pencils. Now, David Rees, somewhere in, I think, 2013 or maybe prior to that, actually started an artisanal pencil sharpening business, where he had, really famous authors and, a lot of, artists who would actually send him pencils, which he would sharpen, sometimes with a knife, with a craft knife, with antique sharpeners that he had collected. And he claims to have had a really successful business just sharpening pencils. And he is somebody who has been quoted saying that he hates electric sharpeners. And he prefers not even these, but mostly, like I said, he believes that the sharpest points come only with knives.
Right. So you whittle away.
Yes. So he did base his business purely on sharpening pencils with the knife.
It's I'm sure it started off with a knife. It probably started off with some kind of stone implement, maybe, if there was charcoal at hand.
I believe blades, craft cutters, knives were initially used before. I think it was in the 1800s that some form of a sharpener was actually invented and patented.
And that may have been something very much like the one that Samir showed us, which is small. This one had a very complicated thing about having a helical blade in there, some kind of motion. It's got a reservoir for your sharpenings, and the sharpenings that come out are extremely odd and little, and they do look like helixes. So, but what you could do with this, other than sharpen a pencil, is make stuff. So, Minjal, show us your.
So I made two pieces with the pencils, the sharpened pencils. One is, the Celtic knot, which I also did some bit of shading. Again, with, a pencil like this, where, you have a sharp enough edge, there is scope to also kind of shade with it. So you get these really sharp edges, and then you can also shade with it. And I used the really sharp edges to also make this lettering piece.
And it's a lettering piece about peace.
Yes.
Samir, what have you done?
It's actually interesting to see how this is very similar but very different from the piece that Minjal did with the mechanical pencil.
Right, and in a mechanical pencil is the opposite end of things because you can't sharpen a mechanical pencil. Not with a implement, let's say.
What I did notice, of course, the lines that I got in that piece, they were consistent. Now here, because, you start with a really sharp tip. By the time you really come to the end of it, it kind of broadens a little. It's a little flatter. So that kind of variation is only possible with,
I think a lot of that has to do with how you hold a pencil when you're drawing. I hold it quite like a usual implement. So this probably won't show up on camera, but I almost never have a problem having at least an edge. I suppose you may have used it more like a calligrapher, which is more straight on.
Yes.
So the tip blunts more quickly for you, whereas because of the way I use it, even when I'm drawing a line like that, I'll pull a line like that or push a line like that. So you get various facets that remain sharp over a longer time. But since we're talking about sharpness, let's go over the guy who doesn't want things to be mechanically sharpened. I think there's a place for mechanical sharpeners. I think they save time. I think as pencils become cheaper and better pencils become cheaper, let's say, I think it's fine to have a mechanical sharpener and just save yourself some time. Also, it's kind of cool to use, right?
I've seen so many videos on YouTube which are ASMR pencil sharpening videos.
Okay.
When I sometimes sit with my pencils and there's a whole bunch that I've not really used, but I sit and just sharpen them with the Derwent because it is a lot of fun.
So, did you have fun with your sharpening and experiment?
I had a lot of fun because I stuck to my favorite subject, which is a face. But the other thing that I really enjoyed with this, and in some ways this is similar to a previous test we did on paper, we're so used to doing tests on with the implement that we actually used to draw. Now that this was something that was not being used to make the actual art, I got to test a bunch of different pencils with it, which was a lot of fun.
Okay.
So this piece, for example, used all of these pencils. So this included the Staedtler Mars Lumograph, which we have covered in the previous video, the Apsara Extra Dark, which we have also covered in the previous video. This is the green checking pencil that Vishal was talking about.
Same one is...
again, we have a video related to that. This is one we haven't covered yet, but we probably will at some point. It's an Apsara glass marking white pencil. And the reason I tried such a range was also to see how the sharpener behaves with various different thicknesses and hardnesses of lead and medium, and it was very enlightening to try all of these out. So the drawing uses all of these, and also a bunch of simple color pencils. These are from Tom's, whom we have done a video about their sketch pens before. So as Vishal and Minjal have been saying, this does produce a point that's very specific. That's unlike other sharpeners. Now your standard pocket sharpener like this produces a point which, and you can see the difference here in this set actually, produces a point that's very shallow, like all of these pencils here. But you can see some of them have been sharpened with the Derwent. There's the blue one here, the long point, the yellow one, the orange one, which are much more like these points here, which are long and narrow. The interesting thing that I found was that it of course does not work very well with points or materials which are very soft. So the glass marking pencil never came to a point using the Derwent.
The glass marking pencil is almost like a crayon.
It is pretty much a very sort of, it's almost clayey in its consistency. I had some trouble with the checking pencil as well because I think they're a lot more brittle than your regular graphite.
Yes, but I must say that as someone who uses something like that to get a shallow point, and this one now, because of the way it creates this almost tapered cone rather than a straight one, there is a technique to this where you open up this part and load in the pencil, and then there's a very sort of a slow and specific, this popped in, but with a pencil it would slowly pull in that pressure. and then you can almost like feel it as if you're grinding down a knife or something on a whetstone. You can feel where it's meeting too much resistance and then you get these nice longer points. That one is fully sharpened, I think.
And there are certain points like this particular the checking pencils where it's a lot waxier and harder, where you would not be able to sharpen it this much with a regular sharpener anyway.
Right, yeah.
So in that way, this mechanism helps you to do things which you could not otherwise. The thing I found by using this entire range of pencils is also how important the quality of the wood is when it comes to making a point.
And right now, actually, there is a difference in the woods between even some of these pencils here. I think in a previous episode, you had talked about different woods and how they affect pencils.
Yes, I think essentially the more expensive pencils use a lot denser wood, and the flats for things like what I assume this, for example, uses a wood that's extremely light and rough, and therefore it doesn't really sharpen into a smooth surface, which also means that you can't get it to a sharp point. So it's been quite interesting using these and also using pencils that we have tested out before and seeing how they react to a sharpener like this, because I'll be honest, I don't use this sharpener all that often.
I have not used it as much. My go-to is the thing that I can grab at hand, which is a little Staedtler, which we will cover in the future episodes.
So for example, what I found with these two pencils, which we have covered before, is that the Apsara and the Staedtler sharpen to a great point, both of them. But when I'm drawing with that point, I prefer drawing with the Staedtler. But when I'm doing the sideways shading that Vishal and Angel have also done, I actually preferred the Apsara because it gives you a lot lighter spread than the Staedtler, which kind of goes straight into a scratchy, dark area. So it's interesting that the different woods and the different pencils also react differently to a tool like this. I had quite a lot of fun just testing this out.
I mean, one of the reasons why we're also, testing this is, again, this is a little to do with nostalgia. When I was growing up, these crank-based sharpeners were very expensive. So I had a blue Staedtler, manual sharpener like this, which cost, maybe 1,500, 2,000 rupees in the 80s, which was very expensive.
That's huge. That would have been maybe hundreds of dollars even now.
Right, and now this sharpener is available for 900 Indian rupees, which is not very expensive. And also for lettering artists and calligraphers, if you want to, draw guidelines, sure, you can use the mechanical pencil, but if you're used to, the good old pencils, then it's great to use one of these.
Should we demonstrate using one of these?
I think we should, because I don't think we can talk about this sharpener without the auditory and visual experience of actually using one. That's a very unique sound.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Now that's as sharp as one can get with this particular sharpener.
Which I think it's a good compromise because it's not the most pin sharp point in the world, but it's also a strong point. Again, because of that sort of curved taper, I think the point of it, the very point of it, bulges a little compared to. So you get a less brittle. Very often you'll sharpen to a pure total pin sharp point. And the first thing that happens when it hits the page is that it breaks.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with one of the many words that were in the long title that is this sharpener's name, which is helical. I was explaining to you before that the pocket sharpener uses a flat blade which cuts in a straight line.
It basically cuts the entire face of the cone.
Right. So a normal sharpener has a blade like this and the pencil rotates and just does that and cuts against it. Now, a helical sharpener actually has two cylinders that sit at this angle. So there's one here and one there. And that has a helix of sharp edges around it.
Okay.
And while you rotate this, it kind of carves along the entire length of it.
So it's more like a lathe than a blade.
Yeah, and we'll probably put a video on about how the inside of this mechanism works.
Okay.
But yes, that's the reason why you get that slight board kind of shape to it as well, because it's literally carving out this wood rather than just cutting it.
And that's
like
also
a regular sharpener.
that's also why the shavings are extremely unusual. They're like little curls rather than these long shavings that you're used to from sharpeners.
Yeah. So yes, this is an extremely interesting tool. It produces some beautiful results. I don't think it's for everyone and for every use. I think there is still a lot of space for using a regular sharpener or using a knife to get different results from pencils.
But I think we talked about this in our Apsara pencil episode, on this very pencil, in fact. That many times when you're working and you just want to concentrate on the work, you need a point that's good enough. I'm sure that the man who sharpens pencils for a living is biased towards the precision points that he makes, but some of us are bothered about the things we can make with it rather than on just the point of the tool. And yeah, for us, just being able to achieve this you saw that in 10 seconds, reliably, so that I know what is going to go down on the page when I put it there. That is, well, you can't really put a price on it. People we know it's like 900 rupees here, which is, I don't know, $10 or $15, maybe wherever you are. I think if you can afford it for yourself or for someone who you think will like this kind of thing.
And if you use enough pencils.
Get one of these. It's the Derwent helical, mechanical, rotary, crank, mini, because there's for some reason maybe it's for those comedy sized pencils, or just because the boss requires a bigger pencil sharpener. Maybe the crank is motorized. There are motorized sharpeners, I know. But yeah, it's nice to have one of these around. It's nice to have one of the other ones around, and we will come to those at some point as well. Like I said, the one that I use most is literally the one that I can grab and go most of the time. So we will grab these and go. But before then, you should like this video, subscribe to our channel for more test drives, follow us on social media, follow Inky Memo, and sign up for Inky Memo's newsletter, which has many stories about things like this. Until next time, I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
Keep those points tapered.